He's an expert on branding. He talks around the world about it. He's an author of books. Let's have a seat, Robert. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert Govers. Now, Robert, you write about branding, positioning. You speak about it in different governments, different countries. I could safely say that you are an expert in the field. But let's start with the definition, because when I hear branding, I think of brands and commercial brands or product placement, and then I hear positioning a country. Can you maybe explain a little bit what does that mean?
Well, thank you very much, because it's a good question, because there's a lot of confusion around the idea of brands and branding. And I would define a brand as a named entity that occupies space in people's minds, so mental space. So corporations, products, celebrities, but also places can be brands as they gather name awareness and associations. So branding I see as managing those associations that people have in their minds. And this can also therefore be applied to places. City branding is a thing. Here, of course, we're talking about nation branding. So for me, that's about reputation management of a place. And therefore, you need a positioning strategy, because in the positioning strategy, you define what position you aim for in the minds of consumers internationally relative to other places. So it's about actively managing the mental associations that people have with the country. Now, the good thing about the Netherlands is that it already is a very strong brand. We can safely say that it occupies a very high place in the ranking of nation brands. There are such things as nation brand rankings, and Netherlands usually does very well. Yet, some people would say in government as well as in the private sector that some of the associations might be somewhat cliché and outdated. So there was this desire to more proactively manage these associations, and this is how the project came along.
And then what? Do you just communicate it and put it into action?
Well, that's a good question, because there's a lot of confusion there again when we talk about, when people think of brand.
Yeah.
And of course in commercial branding, a lot is to do about naming something and then doing visual identity for it, which is then trademarked. Okay. Now, of course, when we're talking about countries, you're not really trademarking anything, because you have a long established name and historical associations that have been built up. Yeah. So the idea of logos and slogans, even though we see some of it here today, this statement is not really meant as a slogan. It's a sort of a guiding principle in the initiatives that we do. So the idea of logos and slogans, advertising campaigns, is not so much important when we're talking about cities, regions, countries. You might think otherwise, of course, because you just have to watch CNN or BBC World and you'll see incredible India and Malaysia, truly Asia, and what have you. Yeah. So you might think that, no, this is what it's about. But it's never been proven that that really has a big effect. What does have an effect is, as André already said, is to walk the talk. It's through building substance and what we call substance and symbolic actions. So it's projects, it's initiatives, it's government policy, it's collaboration, collaborative initiatives that really make a difference by getting media attention and social media engagement internationally.